What if I told you that the most dangerous man in any company isn't the loudest one in the room? It's the quiet one, the one who comes in before everyone else and leaves after everyone's gone home. The one whose name you never see on the press releases, but whose fingerprints are on everything that works. What happens when a company steals 2 years of that man's life and he decides it's time to collect? This is the retribution file, and this is the last signature.
Nathan Cole was 41 years old and had given 16 years of his life to Meridian Tech. 16 years of the same turnstile, the same elevator, the same corner desk on the 23rd floor. Not an office, never an office, just a well-lit corner with 2 monitors and a succulent plant his wife Mara had bought him because she said he needed something alive near him while he worked. The plant was doing great. Nathan watered it every single morning for 3 years. He was the kind of engineer that companies depend on and rarely think about. The kind that gets called at 3 in the morning when the system goes down and nobody else knows what to do. The kind that solves the crisis, files the report, and shows up at 8 a.m. the next day like nothing happened. No awards, no headlines, no corner office, just the work. And Nathan believed in the work. He believed in it so much that 2 years before this story ends, he started building something alone, before anyone asked, before anyone knew. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., while Chicago slept and the city lights reflected off Lake Michigan in the cold dark, Nathan sat at his home desk and built. The project was called Atlas. In theory, it was an artificial intelligence system to automate Meridian Tech's entire logistics chain. In practice, it was the most ambitious thing any engineer at that company had ever attempted. And Nathan was building it by himself. At 5:30 in the morning, before the company coffee was ready, before the meetings started, before the whole circus began. Nobody asked him to do it. He did it because he believed. Because he believed that when Atlas was finished, Meridian would become a different company. Because he believed that 16 years of working in the dark deserved a light at the end. And because he had promised Mara that after this, after Atlas, he would give her their life back. Mara Cole was 38 years old and had been loving Nathan for 14 years. She was an art teacher, patient, warm, the kind of woman who brings 2 coffees at 6:15 in the morning and sits in the chair next to her husband's desk just to be near him, even when he barely looks up from the screen. She appeared in that doorway every morning at 6:15 because she knew that if she didn't, he wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink real coffee, would sit there until the moment he had to leave, and would walk out the door without having said a single word to her. She came in anyway. One morning she looked at him for a long moment before speaking, studied that face she had learned to read in 14 years of marriage, saw the concentration, the slight frown, the shoulders slightly tense. He was somewhere she couldn't reach. She walked in anyway. "Did you sleep?" she asked quietly. 3 hours, he said, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Almost done with the authentication layer." "You said that yesterday." He looked at her then. Tired smile. Yesterday was a different layer. She sat in the chair beside him, the chair that was supposed to be for visitors, but that in practice had become hers, the chair from which she watched him work in the rare moments she could reach him. "Nathan, the presentation is next week." "I know." And after that, he stopped, put his hands in his lap, looked at her, really looked, with the tired eyes of someone who had slept too little and thought too much. "After that," he said, with all the conviction he still had, "I give you our life back, I promise." Mara smiled, the smile she kept for the things she wanted to believe, but wasn't sure she still could. She took his hand. For 1 second, Chicago stopped. The snow stopped. The screen stopped. Neither of them knew it was the last quiet morning they would have for a long time. Richard Voss had the gift of entrances. When he walked through the door of the 23rd floor, which was rare because Voss had better things to do than visit the floors below the 38th, the room changed. People sat up straighter. Conversations lowered, they smiled at him. Voss was the kind of man who fills a room, not with intelligence. Nathan was 3 times smarter than him and filled nothing. It was presence, the right clothes, the right tone. The ability to look at a person and make them feel like the most important person in the room, until he turned his back. He had arrived at Meridian 3 years earlier, almost didn't make it past the first 2 months, and had Nathan Cole to thank for still having a job. 3 years before this story, Voss was 2 months into the company when he was about to be fired. The board had discovered that a project he managed at a previous company had failed, and that he had hidden the warning signs for 6 months. There was a meeting, the kind of meeting where everyone already knows the outcome before they walk in. Nathan didn't need to be in that meeting, it wasn't his scope. But he had worked with Voss for 6 weeks and had seen something the board hadn't, that Voss hadn't hidden the warning signs out of bad faith. He had hidden them because he didn't know how to communicate problems without looking incompetent. It was insecurity, not dishonesty. Nathan walked into that meeting. He spoke. He presented data he had compiled in the previous 48 hours, on his own time, without anyone asking. He showed that Voss's previous project had extenuating circumstances. The board listened. Voss stayed. After the meeting in the hallway, Voss had taken Nathan's hand in both of his. "You didn't have to do that," Voss said, and his eyes were genuinely wet. "Why did you?" Nathan shrugged. "Because it was fair." 3 years later, Nathan would understand that saving Richard Voss had been the greatest mistake of his life. One morning, with the presentation 1 week away, Voss appeared at Nathan's corner. "Nathan, working early as always." "Always." "How's Atlas coming along? Next week is the big day." Nathan stopped, looked at Voss. There was something in his tone, a familiarity that shouldn't have been there, as if Atlas belonged to Voss too, as if he had built something. "Almost done. 2 more days on the final authentication layer." Voss clapped Nathan on the shoulder and smiled. "Great. I knew I could count on you." And walked away. Nathan looked back at his screen. He didn't notice what had just happened. He would notice later, and it would hurt the way no betrayal should ever hurt. It was Thursday night. The presentation to the international board was Friday morning. Nathan was at the office. 10:47 p.m. The floor was empty. Atlas was done. Not almost done. Not functionally done. Done. The biometric authentication layer, the digital signature Nathan had built as the system's final line of security, was active. Tested. Perfect. Nathan sat for a moment looking at the screen. 2 years. 2 years of 5:30 a.m. mornings. 2 years of lost weekends. 2 years of Mara waiting at the doorway with tea that went cold. 2 years of children asleep before he came home. 2 years, and it was finished. He picked up his phone, called Mara. "Nathan, what time is it?" Her voice was heavy with sleep. "It's done, Mara." His voice broke a little. "Atlas is done." Silence on the other end, and then she woke up completely. He could hear it. "Really?" Her voice trembled. "Really? Come home, Nathan." She was crying softly. "Come home right now." He closed the laptop, picked up the empty coffee cup, looked out the window at Chicago lit up below him. He had no idea that this was the last time he would look down at that city from up here, at least for a while. Nathan arrived on Friday at 8 a.m. The presentation was at 10. He was wearing a suit. the only suit he owned, bought 6 years ago for a friend's wedding. A little tight in the shoulders now. Mara had spent the previous night adjusting it, laughing as she pinned the fabric. "You're too stubborn to buy a new one." He had the Atlas flash drive in the left pocket of his jacket. Sandra Okafor was waiting for him at reception. "Nathan, would you come with me, please?" He followed, because he was Nathan Cole, and Nathan Cole always did what was asked. The HR room was on the 22nd floor, 1 floor below his. A room he had never been in. White walls, a table, 2 chairs, an artificial plant in the corner, unlike his, which was real. Richard Voss was there. Nathan stopped at the door. Something in his stomach turned. "Have a seat, Nathan," Voss said. Calm, almost gentle. Nathan sat, looked from Voss to Sandra. Sandra opened a folder, placed a document on the table. "Nathan, following a performance review conducted over the past several weeks, the company has made the decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately, due to continued underperformance and failure to meet the metrics established for your role." Nathan said nothing. He heard the words, every one of them, but his brain was refusing to process them in the right order. "Underperformance," he said, barely audible. "Correct. The severance package is outlined on page 2. I finished Atlas last night." He looked at Voss. Voss didn't blink. "The project has been delivered, yes. The company appreciates your contribution." Contribution? 2 years, 5:30 a.m. Mara waiting. Contribution. "You can't do this. The presentation is today. I need to be there to—" "The presentation will proceed as planned," Voss said, cutting him off, still calm. "You don't need to worry about that." Nathan looked at him, really looked, and saw, for the first time, with complete clarity, what had always been there. Voss had always known, he had always planned, the familiarity with Atlas, the rare visits to the 23rd floor that weren't visits, they were progress checks. Status updates on a project that Voss had already decided would be his, and Nathan had delivered the night before. Perfect and complete, exactly when Voss needed it. The box had 3 things: Mara's succulent, a photo of the 2 of them taken at a company anniversary party 4 years ago, and a worn blue mug that said, "World's okayest engineer," a gift from an intern who had passed through the team 2 years earlier and never came back. The security guard walked beside Nathan to the elevator. The hallway was full now. It was 8:45. The team had arrived. Kevin Shaw was at his desk. He stopped typing when he saw Nathan with the box. Kevin's eyes met Nathan's for half a second, and Kevin looked away. He said nothing. He didn't stand up. He didn't ask. He looked away and turned back to his screen. 16 years. And that was it. Nathan stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. He was alone. The mirror returned the image of a man in a suit holding a small cardboard box and a succulent plant. On the 23rd floor, Atlas, the system Nathan had spent 2 years building, was being renamed in the company's servers. Credit was being reassigned. Commit histories were being altered. Nathan's name was being erased. It was 9:22 when Nathan arrived home. Mara was in the kitchen. She heard the key in the lock and thought it was the mailman. Nathan never came home before 7 p.m. When she turned and saw him standing at the door in his suit with the box and the succulent and red-rimmed eyes, she didn't understand for a full second. And then she did. She walked to him, took the box from his hands, set it on the floor, and held him, really held him without warning with both arms, the way she hadn't held him in a long time because there was always a screen between them or a deadline or a meeting or Atlas. He didn't cry. Nathan wasn't the type, but he pressed her arms with a force that said everything. "What happened?" she asked against his shoulder. "Voss," he said, his voice hoarse. "He took Atlas, presented it as his. They fired me before the presentation." Mara pulled back, looked at him, really looked, with those eyes that in 14 years had learned to read him completely. "He took your project?" "Yes." "The project you built for 2 years?" "Yes." "The man whose job you saved." Nathan closed his eyes. "Nathan, look at me." He looked. "Stop being invisible." Silence. Nathan Cole looked at the woman he had almost lost because of a project they had stolen from him. And something inside him, something that had been quiet for 16 years, began to wake up. That night, after Mara fell asleep, Nathan went to his home office, sat in the same chair, turned on the monitors, plugged in the flash drive. Atlas opened. The interface Nathan knew better than anyone in the world. And there, buried under 6 layers of code, in a place no Meridian engineer would find in less than 3 months of trying, was the biometric authentication layer, the last signature, the one Nathan had written at 10:47 on Thursday night, the one that existed only as code on that flash drive and in Nathan Cole's memory. Without it, Atlas would run normally for 30 days. On the 31st day, it would stop. Completely. Without warning, without an error message, it would simply stop. The contract with the European Union, the contract that would be signed based on the Atlas demonstration, had a deadline, 32 days. Nathan looked at the screen, and for the first time since that morning, he smiled. You can steal a man's work. You can never steal his signature. On day 20 after the presentation, Atlas began showing the first signs. Not visible errors, not yet. Small slowdowns, modules taking 0.3 of a second longer to respond. A European integration suddenly requiring 2 authentications where one had been enough before. Meridian's engineers reported to Voss. Voss dismissed it. Normal implementation adjustments. The system is new. Monitor it and let me know if it gets worse. But Voss, that night, searched on his own, opened the Atlas code on his office laptop, tried to understand the architecture. He couldn't, because Richard Voss was not an engineer. He never had been. He managed engineers, which is completely different from understanding what they build. And Atlas's code was the code of a man who had spent 2 years inside it alone. Dense, elegant, and impenetrable to anyone who didn't know where to look. Voss closed the laptop. For the first time since the Friday of Triumph, something cold moved down his spine. On day 26, Atlas locked the first module. The European Logistics Routing System, the core module of the demonstration that had convinced the Brussels representatives, stopped synchronizing. The optimization engine began delivering results 12% below what had been promised. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was measurable, and the European technicians measured everything. An email arrived from Brussels at 11:47 p.m. We are noticing performance inconsistencies in the routing module. Please advise. Voss called an emergency engineering meeting for 8 a.m. I want to understand what's happening with the routing module. Someone explain it to me. Silence from engineers looking at their own screens. We've been analyzing since last night, the senior engineer said. The problem is somewhere in the system's authentication layer, but this is an architecture none of us built. It's going to take time to understand. How much time? He hesitated. Weeks, maybe more. The cold in Voss's spine dropped another degree. On day 28, Voss closed his office door, dismissed his assistant, and sat alone. He knew what he needed to do. He had known since day 20 when the first signs appeared. He just couldn't admit it. He picked up his phone, found the contact, Nathan Cole. He stared at the name for 45 seconds, then put the phone in his pocket and called Sandra Okafor. Sandra, I need you to find a discreet way to reach out to Nathan Cole, not as a rehire, as a consultant, short-term, technical issue we need to resolve. Richard, are you sure? After the way things were handled, find a way, please. He hung up, walked to the window, looked at Chicago below, the same streets, the same buildings he had seen on the morning of his triumph. They looked smaller now. Nathan was in the kitchen when Sandra's message came through, short, formal, asking about a short-term technical consulting opportunity. He read it twice, set the phone down. Mara was on the other side of the counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. She had seen his expression change. Who was it? Sandra Okafor, Meridian HR. Mara stopped chopping, looked at him. What does she want? Nathan picked up the phone again, looked at the message one more time, then looked at Mara. They need me, he said, calm, with a precision she had never seen in his face before. Silence. Are you going to go? Nathan put the phone in his pocket. When I'm ready. Day 30. One day until Atlas collapsed completely. The engineers didn't know that. Voss didn't know that. Nobody knew, because nobody knew the layer existed. What they knew was that the system was degrading, slow, constant, like an internal hemorrhage nobody could locate. The European modules were running at 67% of promised efficiency. Brussels had sent 3 emails in the last week. The last one, sent at 10 p.m. by a technical director named Eric Holst, had just one line. Mr. Voss, we need a call tomorrow, 9 a.m. Brussels time. Voss hadn't slept well. He was in the office at 7, tie on, untouched cup of coffee, staring at dashboards he barely understood, but that were clearly red where they should have been green. Paul, give me something good. The inventory module is still stable. Is that good? It's the only one that is. Nathan didn't respond to Sandra because Nathan was having breakfast with Mara. That hadn't happened on a weekday in 2 years. They were sitting at the kitchen table, the table Mara had bought when they moved into that house, which for years had one side perpetually empty because Nathan rarely came home before 8 p.m. Sunlight came through the east window. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Did they call again? She asked, without looking up from the newspaper. Sandra sent another message last night. And? I read it and went to sleep. Mara put the newspaper down, looked at him. Something had been different about him since Wednesday, since the plan had started taking shape. Not arrogance. Something quieter and more dangerous than that. The serenity of a man who knows exactly what he's doing. When are you going to respond? Nathan finished his coffee, set the cup in the sink, looked out the window at the snow-covered backyard. Tomorrow. Why tomorrow? He turned to her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Because tomorrow is day 31. Atlas stopped at 6:14 a.m. on day 31. Not with an error, not with a system message. It simply stopped, exactly as Nathan had designed. The advanced automation modules entered contingency mode. European integrations went offline. The routing system returned a blank screen. The on-call engineer noticed at 6:17, called Paul. Paul called Voss. Voss answered on the 3rd ring, voice still thick from sleep. Richard, Atlas is down. Silence. What do you mean down? It's not a crash, it's a shutdown, controlled, like the system was programmed to stop. None of the European modules are responding. Another silence. Longer. You're telling me the system was programmed to stop? It appears so, but I don't know who did it or when or... Call me back in 10 minutes. He hung up, lay in the dark for exactly 8 seconds, then got up. In that moment, Richard Voss understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. enough to know that Nathan Cole had not been careless, that Nathan Cole had not made a mistake in the code that was degrading the system, that everything, every module, every slowdown, every signal over the past 10 days had gone exactly as Nathan had planned, and that he, Richard Voss, Senior VP of Technology, self-declared architect of Atlas, had absolutely no idea how to fix it. Eric Holst called at 8:43, not through the scheduled channel, directly to Voss's personal phone. Mr. Voss, our systems registered that Atlas entered contingency mode at 6:14 Chicago time. None of the integration modules are responding. The contract's technical validation clause expires in 2 days. I need to know now. Will the system be restored in time? Voss was in the conference room. Paul was beside him. Sandra Okafor stood at the back, with the same neutral expression as always, but her shoulders slightly higher than usual. Eric, we're working on a solution as we speak. It's a technical issue that our team will resolve within the next... Mr. Voss, I need a technical answer, not a public relations answer. Will the system be operational for validation in 2 days? A pause. 3 seconds. 3 seconds in which Voss looked at Paul, and Paul looked back with the eyes of someone who had no answer. We're working on it. I'll call again tomorrow at 9 a.m. If there's no concrete update, I'll need to involve our legal team to review the contract terms. The call ended. Silence in the room. Richard, Sandra said, get Nathan Cole, now. Personal number, address, whatever it takes. I need to speak to him today. At 10:22, Nathan finally responded to Sandra's message. One line. Available to talk, but not with Sandra. Directly with Voss. Today, 2 p.m. My office, meaning my home. Address attached. Come alone. Mara was reading over his shoulder when he wrote it. Are you sure? She asked quietly. Nathan hit send. He'll come. How do you know? Because he has no choice. And because Voss always shows up when he needs something. The difference is that this time I'm the one who has what he needs. The phone vibrated 40 seconds later. Sandra. Confirmed, 2 p.m. Nathan closed the laptop, looked at Mara. Can you make that coffee you make when you want to impress someone? Mara laughed. The first real laugh in days. That man does not deserve my coffee. No, but I deserve to watch his face when he realizes he's in my home asking for help. Voss arrived at 1:58 in his own car. Not a ride share because he didn't want a record. Dark suit, no tie, which for Voss was the equivalent of showing up in pajamas. He stood at the door, rang the bell. Nathan opened it, jeans and a sweatshirt, coffee cup in hand, completely at home, because it was his home. The two men looked at each other for a moment. 16 years at the same company. 3 years of Voss being the face and Nathan being the structure. 1 moment of betrayal on the 22nd floor. And now this. Voss on Nathan's front step in the Chicago cold, needing a favor. Nathan, Voss said. He tried his usual smile. It didn't come out quite right. Nathan opened the door wider, didn't smile back. Come in. They sat in the home office, the same place where Nathan had built Atlas. Voss looked at the monitors, at the notes on the board, at the succulent Nathan had brought home. The system stopped, Voss said. Direct, because he had no time not to be. I know. Do you know why? Yes. Voss looked at him, and for the first time in that conversation, for the first time in months, maybe years, he looked at Nathan Cole. Really looked. Not as the engineer in the corner, not as the invisible man, as someone who knew something he didn't. Nathan, the European contract expires in 2 days. $212 million. The entire company is watching this. I need you to fix the system. Silence. I know what you need. Then, I didn't say I'm going to do it. The room went quiet. Outside, wind moved the snow along Chicago's sidewalks. "What do you want?" Voss asked. Nathan set his cup on the desk, crossed his arms, and looked at Voss with the calm of a man who had spent 3 weeks preparing for exactly this moment. "You kept your job 3 years ago because I walked into a room and told the truth about you. Do you remember that?" "I remember." "You took 2 years of my work, registered it as yours, fired me on the morning of the presentation so I wouldn't be in the room when the system I built was presented as your creation." A pause. "Am I describing the facts correctly?" Voss said nothing. "Richard, am I describing the facts correctly?" Through his teeth, barely audible. "Yes." Nathan unfolded the document on the desk, pushed it toward Voss. "Then here is what's going to happen." The document had 4 items. Nathan read aloud, slowly, because he wanted every word to land. 1. Formal documented acknowledgement, signed by you and the Meridian board, that the Atlas system was developed entirely by Nathan Cole, senior engineer, over a 2-year period, with public credit corrected across all company materials, including the press releases already published. Voss looked at the paper. 2. Immediate rehire with the title of Director of Systems Engineering, a position that should have existed years ago. Appropriate compensation, a clause protecting against termination without cause for the next 3 years. Nathan, the board won't. 3. A 4% royalty participation on revenue generated by the European contract, retroactive to the signing date, as the creator of the technology that made the contract possible. Voss was pale. 4. Sandra Okafor is transferred to a different department with no access to termination or performance review processes for a minimum period of 2 years. Complete silence. "You're extorting me," Voss said. His voice had finally lost its control. Not a shout, a tremor. "No," Nathan said with absolute calm. "I'm presenting the fair terms for a situation you created. Extortion would be asking for something that wasn't mine. Everything on that list was already mine. I'm just asking for back what you stole." Voss looked at the document for a long time. "And if I don't sign?" Nathan picked up his coffee cup, took a sip, looked out the window. "Atlas stays down. The European contract expires. $212 million returns to Brussels with interest and penalties. Meridian enters a mandatory technical audit, which will discover that the declared architect of the system cannot explain the first 3 layers of his own code." He turned back to Voss. And then the question stops being, "Why does Nathan Cole want recognition?" and becomes, "How did Richard Voss present a system he didn't build as his own?" That's a different conversation, with different lawyers. The silence that followed was the silence of a man watching every exit close, one by one. Mara appeared in the doorway with 2 coffees. She wasn't listening, or perhaps she had been and simply chose the right moment to enter. She set the cups on the desk, looked at Voss, no smile, no visible anger, just looked. And Voss, for the first time that afternoon, looked away. Because Mara Cole didn't need to say a word. Her presence said everything. She was the lost weekends, the cold mornings, the postponed promises, the price Nathan had paid to build what Voss had stolen. She left without saying a word. Voss looked at the document. "I need to speak with the board," he said quietly. The drama was gone. "You have until tomorrow at 8 a.m. After that, I call Eric Holst directly and tell him everything." Voss left at 4:32. Nathan closed the door, stood in the hallway for a moment. Mara appeared from the kitchen. She didn't ask how it went. She had seen enough. She walked to him, rested her head against his chest. He put his arms around her. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "Almost." "Are you okay?" Nathan thought before answering. really thought, not the automatic reflex of "I'm fine" he used to give when he wasn't. "I am, for the first time in a long time. I am." They stayed like that for a moment, the two of them in the hallway of their home, with Chicago quiet outside and snow falling again over the streets. And then Nathan's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. A number he didn't recognize. International, Switzerland. He frowned, answered. "Mr. Cole, my name is Patricia Lund. I'm the CEO of Meridian Group, the parent company. I believe we need to talk." Nathan went still. Mara looked at him, watched his expression change. "I've been reading some very interesting audit logs from our Chicago office, and your name keeps appearing in places where another name has been written over it." Silence. "Mr. Cole, are you available tomorrow morning?" Nathan looked at Mara. Mara raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Miss Lund," he said, with the calmest and most certain voice he had ever had. "I am." Patricia Lund was 54 years old. She had run Meridian Group for 11 years. She did not visit the American offices often. When she did, it was because something was very right or very wrong. This time, it was the second. She landed in Chicago at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, 12 degrees below zero. She crossed the tarmac with long, precise strides, the kind that don't hurry for anyone or anything. On the plane, she had read the server audit logs, the Atlas commit histories, the file metadata, those invisible layers that record who created what, when, and on which machine. The name that appeared in every layer of the code, in every file, in every commit over the past 2 years was not Richard Voss, it was Nathan Cole. And at some point between creation and presentation, someone had tried to erase that. Tried, because server metadata doesn't lie and doesn't disappear completely, not for someone who knows where to look. Patricia Lund knew where to look. Nathan arrived at Meridian Tech at 8 a.m. sharp, not in a suit, dark slacks and a blazer, put together, but on his terms. The same entrance as always, the same turnstile, the same receptionist. But this time, the receptionist looked at him differently, because Patricia Lund had called the office at 7:30 and said Nathan Cole had unrestricted access to the building that day. And when Patricia Lund said something, Meridian Tech obeyed, because Meridian Group paid every salary in that building. The elevator went up, not to the 23rd floor, to the 38th. For the first time in 16 years, Nathan Cole was going to the 38th floor. The doors opened. The floor receptionist looked up, stood, escorted him. "Miss Lund is waiting for you, Mr. Cole. Right this way." Mr. Cole. In 16 years at Meridian Tech, Nathan Cole had never been called Mr. Cole by anyone in that building. Patricia Lund was standing at the panoramic window when Nathan walked in. Chicago was below, gray and cold and vast as always. She turned, extended her hand. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming." It was an easy decision. She smiled, not the corporate smile, the smile of someone who recognizes precision when they hear it. "Have a seat." She opened the folder on the table. Nathan recognized the documents, copies of the audit logs, server metadata, Atlas commit history. "I'll be direct because I have neither the time nor the patience not to be." She pointed to the documents. "These records show that you are the sole author of the Atlas system. Every file, every layer, 2 years of work with your fingerprint on every line of code." "Yes." "And they also show that someone attempted to overwrite those records in the days following your termination." "Tried, but server metadata is more honest than the people who try to erase it." Patricia looked at him for a moment, with the gaze of someone assessing, not a resume, not a title, not an appearance, substance. "Why didn't you go to the press? It would have been simpler." because I don't want to destroy the company. I want the company to function correctly. 16 years of my life are inside those walls. I want my work to be recognized. I don't want a fire. I want justice. Silence. That's either very mature or very strategic. It can be both. She looked at him one more second, then closed the folder. I've called the board for 10 a.m. I want you in the room. The boardroom had a long, dark oak table, 8 chairs on each side. Patricia Lund sat at the head. Nathan sat to her right, the seat normally reserved for the most important guest. Voss entered last, looked at Nathan. Nathan looked back. No anger, no triumph on his face. Just looked. It was worse than if he had smiled. Good morning. I'll be brief because everyone's time here is valuable, and because this subject requires no drama. It requires clarity. She opened the folder, distributed copies of the logs to everyone at the table. What you have in your hands are the technical records of the Atlas system's development, server metadata, version history, machine authentication logs. These records show, unequivocally, that the system was developed by a single person, Nathan Cole, senior engineer at this company for 16 years. Silence in the room. The same records show that in the 4 days following Mr. Cole's termination, a termination for underperformance, I'll note, there was an attempt to overwrite the authorship metadata on company servers. She looked at Voss. Mr. Voss, do you have a technical explanation for that attempt? Every head turned to Voss. Voss opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. There was a project management transition that may have caused... Mr. Voss, I read every line of these logs. There was no transition. There was an attempt at erasure. There is a difference. Complete silence. The CFO, sitting beside Voss, moved his chair very slightly to the side, the unconscious gesture of someone who doesn't want to be associated with what's happening. Nathan had asked for one thing from Patricia Lund in their 8 a.m. meeting, that Kevin Shaw be invited to the board meeting. Patricia hadn't asked why. She had agreed. Kevin stood up when Patricia called him. He was pale. His hands weren't completely still. Mr. Shaw, you worked with Nathan Cole for 4 years. Were you aware of the Atlas project's development? Yes. His voice was low but steady, the voice of someone who had decided it was time to be honest, even if it cost him. I knew Nathan was building Atlas. The whole team knew. It wasn't an internal secret. It was a secret upward. Nathan came in early, stayed late. I watched the system grow over 2 years. And regarding the authorship declared in the board presentation, Kevin looked at Voss. Voss looked back, and there was something in Voss's eyes that was almost a request, not for complicity, for mercy. Kevin looked away. Atlas was built by Nathan, entirely. Everyone on the team knew that. He sat down. Nathan looked at Kevin for a moment. Kevin didn't look back, not yet. But Nathan didn't need an apology in that moment. He needed the truth, and Kevin had given it. Sometimes courage arrives late, but it arrives. Patricia asked the room to clear for 10 minutes, except for her and Voss. Nathan waited outside, in the corridor of the 38th floor, the floor he had never been on in 16 years. Looked through the side window at Chicago. Inside the room, he couldn't hear what Patricia said to Voss. He didn't need to. He had known Patricia for 3 hours and already understood enough about her to imagine. She didn't shout. She didn't humiliate with harsh words. She presented consequences with the same precision with which she had presented the logs, without unnecessary emotion, without drama. Just the cold, bare reality of the facts and what came next. When the door opened, Voss came out first. He passed Nathan in the corridor, stopped. The 2 men looked at each other. There were things Voss could have said, apologies that would have sounded hollow, explanations that would have been insults in disguise, justifications that nobody, not even himself, would have believed. He said nothing. He just looked at Nathan for 3 seconds and walked away. Nathan watched him go to the elevator, watched the doors close. He felt no victory, no anger, something cleaner than both. The quiet satisfaction of a man who did what needed to be done and can look back without shame at how he did it. Patricia offered Nathan the 38th floor office to work from. He accepted, not out of vanity, but because it was the only place in the building with direct server access, without intermediate approval protocols. It was 11:43. Nathan opened Atlas. He navigated through layers he knew by heart, 6 layers of code that no Meridian engineer would find in less than 2 months. He reached the biometric authentication layer. The cursor blinked in the empty field. He plugged in the flash drive, typed the sequence that existed only in his memory and on that device. The field accepted it. A line appeared on the screen. Green, clean, definitive. Atlas authentication layer. Authorized. System resuming full operation. The modules came back one by one. The routing system, the European integrations, the optimization engine. Everything that had stopped on day 31 returned as if it had never left, because it never had. It had simply waited for the only signature that could reactivate it. Nathan looked at the screen for a moment. 2 years inside that code. 2 years of 5:30 a.m. mornings. Mara at the doorway with cold tea. The promise he had almost failed to keep. He picked up his phone, called Mara. "Nathan," she answered on the second ring. "It's done, Mara." His voice didn't break. It was whole, perhaps more whole than it had ever been. Silence on the other end. And then he heard it, because he knew her in 14 years and recognized the sound. She was crying, quietly, hand over her mouth. "Come home," she said, her voice small and enormous at the same time. "I will. But there's one thing I need to do first." The legal department of Meridian Group, not the American subsidiary, the European holding from Zurich, sent the documents at 2 p.m. Formal acknowledgement of authorship. Public credit corrected. Press release to be distributed to every outlet that had covered the original announcement. Rehire as Director of Systems Engineering. European royalty participation. 3-year contractual protection. And in the company's internal system, in the Atlas files, in the server metadata, in the project's official documents, where it had read developed under the supervision of Richard Voss, VP of Technology, it now read, created by Nathan Cole, lead engineer. Nathan read the document, picked up the pen, and signed. Not with anger, not with loud triumph. With the calm of a man who knew the signature had always been his, had always been, and that it was finally in the right place. When Nathan walked out of the room, Kevin Shaw was in the corridor. He was leaning against the wall, clearly waiting, with the expression of someone who had spent the morning deciding whether or not to do this, and had finally decided he would. "Nathan." Nathan stopped. "I should have spoken up sooner, much sooner. When they fired you, when you walked out with that box, I should have said something and I didn't." A pause. "I have no excuse for that." Nathan looked at him for a moment. "No, you don't." Kevin nodded. He already knew that. "But you spoke today, when it mattered." A pause. "That counts." He kept walking. Kevin stayed in the corridor. Not a hug, not a movie reconciliation, just the truth, raw and sufficient. It was 3:22 p.m. when Nathan Cole walked out of Meridian Tech. No cardboard box, no succulent plant, no security guard beside him. The Chicago cold hit his face, that dry winter cold that cuts but doesn't break. He stopped on the sidewalk for a second, looked at the street, at the cars, at the people passing who knew nothing about what had happened inside. He thought about Mara, about the chair beside the home office desk, about the 6:15 coffee, about the promise. After this, I give you our life back. He took out his phone, sent a message. Leaving now. Do you want to go out for dinner tonight? The answer came in 12 seconds. Yes, but you choose. You deserve to choose. Nathan smiled, put his phone away, started walking. Chicago was cold and loud and indifferent as always. The world hadn't stopped to applaud. No background music, no slow motion. Just a man walking along a winter sidewalk with the stride of someone who finally has somewhere to be. You can steal a man's work. You can never steal his signature.